Hey, welcome back to Dealer Confidential, where we pull the curtain back on dealership transactions. And today is a big curtain, Greg. It's the OEM curtain. As
Yes,
you know, that one's a big one.
it is probably, to me, in my mind, it's the biggest
Yeah,
because
because without the OEM approval, the deal fails 100% of the time.
we could do all the work in the world. We could find the best dealership in the world. We can get the property. We could get all the approvals on the property, get approvals from the bank, get everything. Guess what? There's one approval that you need. Without that approval, you have no deal.
Yeah, they hold the keys to the castle, so to speak, right?
Yeah. So let's
So,
talk about some pre stuff and then some after stuff in the sense of pre coming up with a contract or an LOI or a contract. And then after everything is settled and looks like we moving forward on the deal, then what happens? So I think we got two distinctly different discussions here today. So let's start out with pre. What have you found to be the most important thing prior, I guess, during the sales process, during the sale approval process, do you find?
well, first things first, you don't even get in front of the OEM until you have a legally binding purchase contract. So the LOI is nice. The buyer seller meetings are wonderful, but until you go on paper with a legally binding contract, the OEM has no visibility at all into the deal. And that's not to say that we don't have a lot of work to do before that happens, because as you know, there are 4 or 5 things that the OEM is going to be looking for that we know already that they're going to be looking for, that we have to get ready so that when they do get the deal, we have a good chance of getting to the finish line.
Well,
And
let's talk about that. And I'll interrupt you half a second because to me, those are the key building blocks.
yeah, that's right. So what Greg and I will be doing is qualifying the buyers and preparing the buyers for this OEM approval process, the criteria. And the main criteria, and they're a little different depending on what brands you're looking at, but they want a dealer or a GM resume. Okay, a proven resume. Now, there are first time buyers that don't have that resume, but they're going to have somebody that does have that resume as
Right.
part of their package. We've talked about that.
Yeah, we did.
But what they're looking for is performance metrics that are exceptional. And I'm talking about, depending on what brand you're talking to, some of them call it market share, some of them call it sales effectiveness. There are other different nomenclatures, but they all mean the same thing, market share. Does the person have a track record of being able to represent the manufacturer in that marketplace with above average market share? Okay. So they have to be better than the rest. Okay. And they all have different ways of measuring that depending on the brand, but market share is a big one. The second one, probably equally as important, if I'm honest, is customer satisfaction index, owner loyalty. It's called a lot of different things, but how good is the candidate at satisfying customer expectations? And will they endorse and recommend that person as a person that they want to do business with on a repeat basis? So sales effectiveness, CSI, of course, capital, financial
Right.
capacity. And that's a whole nother podcast, but we will look at the ability to get the loan, but also the ability to meet the manufacturer's operating investment. And we'll do a pro forma. We know what the current dealer's working capital requirements are, and we'll do a pro forma ahead of time to say, hey, does this candidate have the financial capacity to meet the manufacturer's minimum requirements?
Right.
And those are, let's be honest, they tend to overcapitalize these stores. They do not want to put a dealer in the market and have them run out of capital in 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So when they look at the capital requirements, they actually want more than they actually want the candidate to invest, because they want that cushion. And
Right.
and I'd say the last thing is, character, brand, personal brand, no felonies, no bad Google reports, community service. That's a high one at Ford. Demonstrating giving back to the community and being a good corporate citizen is an intangible that Ford looks at for sure in their dealer candidates. So
Now,
that's a long answer to your short question.
yeah, will you, because I'll answer my own question in a minute, but will you school your client in all of these prior to the LOI or prior to the contract?
Yeah.
Because that contract, once it's done, it's done. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, we can modify the contract, but that's what the manufacturer is going to see. They want to see a copy of that thing.
Yeah. No, wasting someone's time is the worst sin. I mean, you never get back that time. So obviously I don't want to waste my own time and certainly my seller client's time, but I also don't want to waste the buyer's time or the
Right.
buyer broker time. So the more time you spend up front talking about those four things and making sure that they're green, the better off it is. So I'm doing that right now with a couple of my listings. There are guys that are calling me saying, "Hey, I want that deal." And I'm saying, "Okay, I'll help you get it, but here's what I need." And well, I don't know anybody. I don't have a resume like that. And there are automotive staffing companies that we work with that can find qualified managers that might be interested in those opportunities. But it comes down to the candidate and them getting together and having shared core values and
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Well, and after you bring me the candidate, after you bring me the store, after I find a buyer, to me, that's when the real work begins. All the other stuff, it's difficult, but the real work to me, and the most difficult part of this whole process, as you and I both know, is the application process. As Hal, you mentioned before, we have a deal. Guy looks pretty good. Guy, gal looks pretty good. We're ready to go to the manufacturer and say, okay, this is our candidate for XYZ franchise, and we'd like to submit an application for his approval. So that's what we're talking about. And what we do next is probably the most important thing, and that's to request the app. And when we say application, it truly is an application. I mean, you may have bought the store already, and we understand that, but the application process is one where the dealer has to then submit himself, or me primarily, to this process. And as we said before, the process is literally hundreds and hundreds of questions that we have to do online. Maybe not hundreds of reports, but a hell of a lot of reports that we have to come up with. We've got to come up with, like you said, Hal, not only our projections, our financials as to who this client is, but what we believe he'll be able to do with the franchise over the next 3 years. It's called a pro forma. We have to come up with that. And all of that is really what the manufacturer in this application process looks at and says, hey, is this he or she the right person for this franchise? Even though they have a contract and they think they bought the franchise, but the manufacturer still theoretically owns the franchise, and he could say yes or no at any time. So that application process that I deal with our clients, Hal, is painstaking sometimes. It takes literally at times months to complete because of the information. And the manufacturer could always come back to us and say, hey, what about this? I see this. Can you get me a clarification? So each time we do a clarification, you may have to wait a week or whatever it might be to get it, resubmit it, wait for the manufacturer to respond. So the process is painful, but at the end of the day, you could own a franchise. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, you didn't buy it until the manufacturer says you bought it. So you might have a contract, but often, in fact, 100% of the time, the buyer will put in there, this legally binding contract is conditioned upon the franchisor's approval. So they can walk away if the franchisor, for some reason, turns it down. But what we're looking for at the end of this package, this long process that Greg just described, is a clear to close, a clearance to close, an approval to close. And then and only then, after we close, we'll send notice to the OEM, the factory, that said we consummated the deal. Then they will execute the sales and service documents post-closing and award the dealer, right? Because they want to make sure, because think about it, there's a resignation and a termination of one dealer and an appointment of the other, and they're concurrent with one another, right? One terminates when one, appoints.
Right.
So,
and we haven't even discussed how we get to that point. New corporation, buy existing corporation. There's literally 100 different ways that we can go about this deal. And each one of those has to be looked at and approved by the manufacturer. The manufacturer says, hey, we want a clean corp. So we have to go out and potentially create a new corporation for this buy, sell, or this buy.
Yeah. The good thing, I was just going to say, the process is long, but the good thing is most manufacturers will run the credit check, will run the background check. They'll take an early look, and they won't make you fill out all 50 documents or 30 documents, whatever be the case, if they didn't think that the candidate was going to make it.
Right.
So
Right.
in Ford's case, which I'm most familiar with, having been on the inside of the tent and on the outside of the tent, they'll give me, it might be 2 or 3 weeks, but they'll give me they won't say, hey, the guy's approved. They'll never say that, but they'll keep going with the package, and you'll know at that point that it's a matter of being able to get everything crossed and dotted and get a deal without wasting everybody's time on
Right.
that stuff if they see
And
no
I think
no
in
light.
future podcasts, we have to talk about obviously banking. I think we have some banking reps coming up in the next few weeks. But that's another whole aspect, because as we're going through the application process, we also have to go through another application process, and that's called either of two things. It's either getting your financing in order, getting your flooring in order, which is a major stumbling block a lot of times right now. And the flooring, obviously, everybody knows what flooring is. That's the bank that comes in and really theoretically owns the vehicle until you release it from the bank, and that's when you pay for it and buy it. That's the typical flooring out way of looking at it. But we got to do all of those things, and this all happens concurrently while the application is in process. And you're right, Hal. You usually get a wink and a nod. Hey, this man, he, she, whatever, looks pretty good, and we like him or her. So
Yeah.
yes, you can proceed with it. And then the other thing that we didn't even mention is the whole state and federal application, in the sense of you need to apply for that license. You're buying the franchise, but you didn't buy a license. You bought the opportunity to apply for that license. And that's another whole application process that we haven't even touched upon. I
Yeah.
think that's a later podcast, by the way,
Yep.
because that's an important one.
Yep. There's it's I guess the headline here is, don't try to do this alone. There's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of sand traps. Leverage 80 years of experience when you do this, and we can make this, smooth, effective, swift, and successful.
Yeah, we got about a minute left. Highlight of today, I'll give you my 2 points. Highlight of today is one word, really, patience. We're going to ask the buyer, and you're going to ask the seller, Hal, but I'm going to ask the buyer just to be patient. This is not an application process that is done overnight. It literally could take weeks to do, with back and forth constantly. So be prepared for that. As you always say, Hal, get your house in order first, and then we could move this thing forward. What's your final?
Yeah, no, exactly right. It's really important to be prepared. Be prepared, and it's a process. It's
Right.
not. It's a journey. Okay, it's not a single step. It's a several stages and steps. Yeah, it's a great feeling when you get to the end.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Well, it's
Brings a lot of satisfaction to all parties.
it's the new year. I want everyone out there, dealerconfidentialpodcast.com. That's dealerconfidentialpodcast.com. Join our family. We'd love to have you.
Our army.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Our army that we're developing. Also, you'll be able to get our emails and our notes and Hal's white paper and all that other wonderful stuff. So it's www.dealerconfidentialpodcast.com. We look forward to having you on board. Final thing, I just have to say this. It's the beginning of a new year. More importantly, it's the beginning of a new tax season. Now, a lot of dealers, and Hal, you said this perfectly a few podcasts ago, a lot of dealers are stepping back and saying, hey, number one, do I want to do this again for another year? We had a good year. We're looking at our statements, looking at our partners. We're looking at everything, our family. Do I really want to do this? So to you people out there who want to venture into this world, this may be the perfect time to do it, because dealers out there are now questioning whether they proceed with 2026, whether they sell, whether they give it to their family, all of which they need our help with. And we're glad to help them. But this is a really good time. This is the time we've been waiting for. It's been a little quiet up till now, but I think we have some good direction.
I mean, there are a lot more buyers than sellers. Multiples are solid and hanging tough, despite maybe some retrenchment back post-COVID. Interest rates are going to come down. Okay, so there's going to be more attractive financing packages available.
Right.
There's a lot of things that consolidation is increasing and moving down in scale. from the big publics to the medium companies to the even smaller ones. So there's a lot. If you're a seller, it's a good time to think about it.
It
Sure is.
is. Okay, Hal, that's it for today.
Yep.
DealerConfidentialPodcast.com. Our next show will be, what are we going to talk about?
I think we're going to talk about real estate and appraisals and environmentals and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, environmental, big issue. Okay, Hal, look forward to it. Have a good one.
Yep.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Craig. All right. See you. We're back at Dealer Confidential, where we pull the curtain back on dealership transactions. And we pull it back every time, don't we, Greg?
Yeah, we do. We're doing a pretty good job of pulling it back.
Talking all kinds of stuff. Today it's going to be real estate, which is it could be it could be a higher value than the actual business in
Yeah.
some cases.
Yep.
With some of these stores that are in metro markets where there's just not enough land to go
Right.
around, right? So
Right.
real estate becomes a very, very important part of the deal, whether it's leased or purchased. You want to make sure oftentimes the real estate is in a separate company from the business. I would say high percentage. And so you want to make sure that the business, as it's valuated, is reflecting and expensing fair market value rent.
Right.
So some people will undercharge themselves and take more profit in the business company. And then some people will overcharge themselves and take profit in the real estate company. We want to make sure that it's fair market value rent so that we can value the business properly. Right.
Right. And you just hit it right on the head. I'd say 90% of these dealers have separate corporations. A separate corporation handles their real estate, handles their advertising, handles their events and everything else. So a lot of dealers use that as another profit center for themselves. So they get all this additional revenue coming in and it shows in their pocket rather than in the dealer's part. I should say in the dealership's pocket or the dealership's financial statement. That's something that Hal, you and I painfully sometimes go through those financial statements and we go to the dealer and we have to question every single line item as to where is this? What'd you do with this? Why did you do that? Because what we have to do, you have to do it obviously to sell the store, but I have to explain to my buyer why this financial statement is the way it is, whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah.
And what did the dealer do in takeouts or modifications? But right now, today, we're not going to talk about financial statements. We're going to talk about real estate.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, Hal, every single client that I have and I represent to you, the first thing they ask me is there real estate? Am I buying real estate with this deal?
Well, a lot of dealers, real estate banks love it, right? So they can loan on the real estate because it's
That's it.
really secure asset, unlike a part or a vehicle that can move around. It's once you own the real estate, it's an estate driven commodity because even if you sell the store down the road and you keep the real estate, mailbox money every month from whoever buys the business from you.
Yep.
So it is a sought after asset, no question about it. The trick is to try to get a piece of property that is cost effective for the use that you're going to be having, right? Because you want best and most valuable use for that property. Because
Right.
I've seen a lot of deals where the business cash flow can't support the value of the real estate because it's just so expensive.
Right.
And then you get another. That's another challenge to get out of that, right? So, and the bank's going to look for debt service on that real estate. So, but anyway, there's a lot of different ways we can go with this broadcast. But today it's real estate. I'll tell you something that comes up more times than not is the appraisal, right? So the dealer most times doesn't have a recent appraisal. So now as a broker, I've got to go out and pull comps and get some estimated market value of that real estate. And sometimes the dealers will buy an appraisal because they really want to know what the real estate will be worth. So they spend the money, they buy the appraisal, and then I can work the fair market value off a current appraisal. But that doesn't mean that the buyer won't, and the bank of the buyer won't want another appraisal, okay? Because they want an independent looking appraisal. So appraisals are, they're not all that expensive, but they do take some time. And I encourage, dealers that if you think that there's a big component, a value component, and you don't know when it's been a while since you've done an appraisal, I encourage them to get an appraisal.
Absolutely. And the difficulty with the appraisal is that that's really an opinion. And we have to base you have to base your sale, I have to base my buy on an opinion of a realtor or another broker who we bring in to do this appraisal, or the owner's grandson who has a real estate company who did the appraisal. And we have to
Yeah.
come up with legitimacy, because what we have to do is we have to stand behind that appraisal on both sides, buyer and seller, and say this is a fair market value for this piece of property. It has nothing to do with the dealership right now. It's just a piece of property with a building on it, and that building is part of the franchise that you're maybe buying, but you're really not. If you don't buy the real estate, you're not buying that building. You're leasing that building, and I think that's where a lot of my dealers get confused. They think, "Hey, I'm buying the franchise." And that means I'm buying the building and all the asset. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It
Mm.
means that you may be buying in part of the contract, you may be buying, they call it FF&E, and that means you're buying the desks, the computers, the phones, the lifts, the compressor in the back, all that stuff. You may be buying that in the deal, but you're not buying the building unless, of course, the owner agrees to sell the property.
Yeah.
And then that opens up not so much for you, but for me, another whole can of worms, lack of a better word, and I call it that. And that's the review process as to how long has this building been a dealership? It goes back maybe to the 20s or 30s. And what did they do with that building for 75 or maybe even longer years? That's the problem that we have right now, because a lot of these older dealers, their father may have given them the dealership. They're now getting into their 60s, 70s, maybe even some of them 80s, and they decide to sell, and they've owned this building how many years, Al? 50 years, 60? What did they do with the building? And it was it a body shop? What did they change oils and flush the oil down the sewer? I mean, what did they do? Seriously, what
Yeah.
did they do with this building? So all of a sudden, that becomes a major concern because of the environmental protection agencies. They
Yeah.
they want to know. So let's walk through that process just a little bit.
Well, just one thing also on the appraisal before we leave that subject, make sure that you're getting an automotive familiar appraiser, right? Because this is not a Costco. This is not a bowling alley. This is not a church. It's got dirt, but it's a special use property and it's set up as a dealership, and it's more valuable than a dealership than it is anything else, the way it's presently configured.
Right.
So get an automotive familiar appraiser if you're going to go out and do that. So that's one thing. Now back to your question on environmental. Yeah, you're exactly right. This thing could have been a gas station
Right.
back in the 50s. There could be
Right.
tanks buried under the 8 inches of asphalt. It could be in a car wash, and there's detergents that are flushed into the soil, oil. I've had a dry cleaner once. And these things, the cleanup for this can be significant.
Absolutely.
So every time I sell a piece of dealership real estate, there'll be a phase one environmental study. That is a cursory look, I will call it. I don't think it's too comprehensive, but they'll look at the history of the property. They'll see if a tank's been removed. Some of the EPA records are up to date, some aren't. I've been challenged on one. Luckily, the dealer saved the paperwork from a tank that was removed, and I had that paperwork I could give to the buyer, and we were past that. But phase ones can slow deals down if there's smoke. Then you got to go to a phase two, and that's when they bore soil samples and they send it off to the lab, and there could be an environmental cleanup, and you'll find all kinds of conditions and contingencies in contracts for clean
Right.
environmental
Right.
reports.
And
And
that
those can hang those you talk about deals getting
breakers.
hung up. To get an environmental soil sample and send it to the lab, get a company to assess what it's going to cost to clean it up, negotiate who's paying what for what, all kinds of complexities.
Right. And we joke about it, but that is a deal breaker in many
Oh, yeah.
cases,
Yeah.
because number one, the buyer had not anticipated spending potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, which it could be, in cleaning the site up. And number two, the owner either didn't know that this site was that bad, or knew it and tried to just get by with a phase one, which is kind of like not really cool, but
Right.
they try to do that. And so I advise if a claim phase one comes back questionable, I always say pay for the phase two and let's find out really what's going on. And if phase two comes back with bad soil, bad this, bad that, sometimes we don't even do an estimate on that. We just walk on the deal. I hate to say it, but we do. There's no love affair with a building that you're willing to potentially drop hundreds of thousands of dollars in unless you stole the property. And the owner is not going to let you steal the property for any reason. So
Yeah.
that's a tough one. And this why I said, on our last podcast, this is a deal breaker. These are the
Mhm.
little deal breakers you never even think about. Everybody always talks about, getting approval and all this other stuff. That ain't it. I mean, and if this is dirty, there's a chance that they could shut this store down. The EPA could shut it down. And even if you have the franchise, you can't do anything with it. Thank
Yeah.
God I've never experienced. Have you, Hal? A
Oh
shut?
yeah. No, I've had 50, 60, $75,000 environmental cleanups that came as a result of dirty phase ones that led to phase
Right.
twos.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing I've found too is even if you're leasing the property, a lot of new lessees will get a phase one to prove to themselves that they're going to be leasing
Good
a
point.
clean property so that at the end of the lease, they don't get stuck with, you dirtied my land, right?
Right.
So if they know that they're going into the lease clean, they feel a lot better about being environmentally, conscious and compliant so
Right.
that they don't get hung with a bill, 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, that to me, I call that the moment in time clause. And that's where you establish that moment in time where you take possession, but you don't take possession of what has gone before. Simple as that. You want a clean start.
Yep.
So many
Yeah.
times when my customers says, yeah, I got to have the real estate, they want the real estate obviously because that's bankable. They can go to a bank, they can get X number of percent, 100%. Sometimes we have companies, Hal and I have companies that will give you 120% of the value of the property. And we could take that 20% and invest it back into the business or use it for working capital or whatever, buy things. So we
Yeah.
have those companies. And like you said before, other brokers don't have them. We have those kind of customers because we deal exclusively in automotive franchising. And with the automotive franchising comes along these professional people who bank on this kind of stuff and they view and look at real estate as a huge asset and they're willing to sometimes give us additional funds for it, right, Hal?
Yeah. Yep. Another point is, facility image programs. Okay. And this can really enhance or detract from a purchase price if the facility is quote unquote image compliant. And you don't know the extent of which it's image compliant until you're into the OEM application process that we talked about last podcast.
Right.
So you might think that you're image compliant, but as Greg and I both know, the OEM has leverage in the transaction, and there could be, you could have a beautiful exterior, but if your furniture is not the latest and the
Right.
greatest, you could be buying all new furniture, computers, you could be setting up brand walls, you could be getting all kinds of television sets that show the options and the colors, and there's all kinds of things. They may not like your ceramic floor, they may want a marble floor.
Oh, yeah.
I
I've
mean,
gone through that. Yeah.
yeah, there's all kind. So make sure that there's some wording in the contract that allows you to limit your exposure on potential facility upgrades. I've
Yeah.
had dealers put in there, this offer is contingent upon the facility being approved by the manufacturer as is,
Right.
or with less than $100,000 of facility upgrade
Right.
or something,
It,
because that can crater a deal
yeah.
as well.
Easily. I mean, we're ending up with our time here, so we're going to have to end it quickly. But there's two things that come to mind just before we close. Number one, don't trust the dealer who's telling you everything is compliant, like you just said, Hal. You have to go and you have to source the manufacturer, and you have to find out what their VI virtual identity program really is and what does it consist of. My last manufacturer that I was with obviously had furniture, like you just said, had desks, had monitor, everything had to be to this particular manufacturer. And the other thing I want to mention is, which is equally as important, is that don't only look at the signage and all of those things. You got to go one step deeper. A lot of these manufacturers, especially with these buy sells that are now taking place with the owner that's been in the building for 50 years or whatever, they may require a significant modification to the building. And I'm not talking about signs and paint. I'm not talking about that. A lot of manufacturers will now say, we want a customer drive-through. We want a drive-through service department with all the latest Hunter computers and equipment. As you drive over, it tells you all this wonderful stuff. That is thousands and thousands of dollars. So we got to get our clients understanding that, hey, looks good, maybe it isn't good.
Yeah.
That's it for today, Hal. Shameless.
Yeah, no, that's a good wrap on real estate.
Yeah,
It's a huge component of the deal.
it is. Find out eyes wide open before you do this stuff. We'll open your eyes for you. We'll help you through the whole process. But you gotta call us. You gotta tell us, hey, you need help. We're there for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
www.dealerconfidentialpodcast.com. Please go to the site, get our newsletter, do all that wonderful stuff. And before we go, Hal, what are we doing next?
I think we're going to talk about money.
Yeah.
One of my very favorite subjects, especially when it's in my pocket and not in your pocket. But no, we're gonna try to get a lender in here to just talk about deal financing and the ins and outs of that.
Right. So we'll have a special guest. And if you have questions, go to our website, dealerconfidentialpodcast.com, put in the question, and we'll ask our loan officer exactly anything that you need to hear. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Hal.
See you, Greg.